Hello! Welcome to tonight's live chat. So tonight we're going to be talking about romance, but not necessarily the genre of romance. This isn't one of our digging deeper into genre chats. Instead, we're going to be talking about more incorporating romance into other genres, whatever you're writing. So the first question I was going to ask everybody is what one of your favorite types of romances or romance tropes are. So Megan, you can go first.
Yes. One of my absolute favorites is rivals to lovers. I also love a good enemies to lovers, but where they don't absolutely want to murder each other. They just want to destroy each other in their chosen field.
Like antagonists?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely rivals to lovers.
It's a good one. I'm writing one of those right now. So Kelly?
I've got two, so I'm going to save one to see if it doesn't get mentioned. But my other one is going to be either too stubborn or too distracted to fall in love. There's so many other things going on, and everybody knows that people are going to end up together, but they just refuse to see it. So you're just kind of getting frustrated, but the tension is building, and it's wonderful.
Yes.
And Rachel?
I also love the antagonists / rivals to lovers. I also love a good friends to lovers. I think it's just really nice.
That was my one.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because that's more realistic, honestly. Because I've been friends with all of my partners before. I don't know, it's wild. But then also, I don't know if this is technically a trope, but it's just a thing that happens where the characters are either gruff towards each other, they don't have time to fall in love, like Kelly said, or they're whatever, and then there's a battle and one of them gets hurt and the other one screams their real name instead of the nickname or the rude thing that they usually call them, and I'm oh my god, such a sucker for that.
Yeah. So good. One of my favorites is the classic fake dating. I'm a sucker. The moment I find out a story has fake dating in it, I'm I'm here for it. I'm ready. So good.
Yes, even just a scene where they're quick, pretend to be my boyfriend or whatever. I'm yep, okay.
I'm here for it. Other people or look.
Yeah.
Conspicuous.
I'm sure there's no other way to distract them.
Yeah. I love a good let's pretend to date to make other people jealous. But oops, we actually like each other.
I was literally rewatching To All the Boys I Loved Before yesterday.
Oh, I need to watch that before the sequel.
Yes.
It's been a while. That was a good fake dating story.
Yeah. Fake dating usually also goes hand in hand with the oh no, there's only one bed.
Yeah.
Trope.
It's true.
Which I was trying to think about that because that trope is so everywhere. And I realized the first time I ever saw that trope was in Leap Year with Amy Adams.
Oh my god.
First time seeing it and realizing what is this?
And they're pretending to be married, I think.
Yes. Fake dating.
So good. So I guess kind of the main topic of this, what we can talk about is how do you make sure when you are including a romance into your book, how do you make sure that you balance the development of that with the rest of the plot as well? Because I think it can be really easy for it to kind of fall by the wayside. And then you're 2/3 of the way book and you're oh yeah, they totally like each other and you haven't developed it at all.
And now they kiss for no reason.
Oh, I've read so many of those.
Yeah, depending on the genre, it can be particularly hard because it has to be realistic of what the other stakes are of how much time do these people have for this, but I want it to happen, so it needs to happen.
I think with a romance, it's important that you make sure that it has a development trajectory the same as your regular plot would. One of the things that I did to try and help me get better about that, because I am really bad about that, was reading books on how to write romance, just straight up whole romance novels. One that I really like is Romancing the Beat: Story Structure for Romance Novels by Gwen Hayes, where it takes a beat sheet and breaks it down for what this would look like in a relationship. Because I think if you aren't as aware of the plot of your relationship as you are the plot of everything else, then it's going to look like it came out of nowhere. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to just be like, oh, it's just the romance. Like, it's not what the book is about. The book is
It'll
about
happen
like
because they're
saving the
spending
world.
time together.
Yeah. Or like it's just going to be there because like you have to have a romance in your book kind of thing. But like it does have to be developed just as much as anything else. Because like usually a good romance, I think, reflects like your character's development as well and like their trajectory. So
yeah, and there's ways you can like kind of layer things in right from the beginning that even if the characters don't see it, like you can kind of hint to the reader that this is what you should be looking for, and that makes it easier for them to see the more subtle things you layer in as you build up that relationship and build a foundation that isn't blatantly romantic right from the beginning, but everybody else knows where that's where this is going.
That makes me think of, I'm reading Wicked Saints right now by Emily A. Duncan, which I am like positive is an enemies to lovers with two of the characters, because they did the trope where someone tips the other person's chin up with their sword, and I was like, bing, bing, bing. That's the enemies to lovers trope.
Yeah, that was actually a question I was going to ask, is like, how do you like signal to your readers early on that like a character is the love interest or like a potential love interest? Because I think kind of like the cliche thing is when it's like, oh, it's the first person of like the opposite gender that they encounter is the love interest, which I always like
first
try
good-looking
to not
person.
do.
And like I do feel like YA has gotten better about it, but it used to be so obvious. So just like, oh, well, it's this person.
Here's this very attractive guy. She's gonna fall for him. Yeah.
They're being very sassy towards each other for no real reason.
Yeah, for sure. Knowing kind of the tropes that you want to play with can definitely help for signaling to readers. And I think also just looking at the chemistry in general, like if they are bantering, why are they bantering?
Yeah, like do they like each other? Like what about the other person does that person like? Like this, you just you see characters that are just like, I hate you, and then like, and they kiss, and it's like, but hold on, like there's nothing. Like, why do you want to if you hate that person?
That's something I'd actually kind of love to see more of, because you do see a lot of that, like the people don't even know that they're attracted to each other. But like, again, especially in YA, I feel like there should be more like, oh, you know, and you're just crushing hard on this person and going about your business and trying to look totally normal.
Well, that's what I do. Like,
that feels way more realistic to me.
Yeah.
And that actually is like a pet peeve within like the YA community that bothers me, is that if you do write that, it's like instantly labeled as Insta-Love. And it's like, oh, Insta-Love. As if people don't ever see someone and be like, oh, that person's attractive, I have a crush on them immediately, you know? Like,
yeah, for sure.
I think a lot of people don't understand what Insta-Love is, and so they label anything that's like instant attraction as Insta-Love.
I actually put this in my last video on the WordNerd channel, and it's also coming up in my next video on the WordNerd channel about the like Insta-Love and kind of like people, you know, first meeting and like liking each other. In my last video, I mentioned that it's like when let's talk about character description, like when you can describe yourself. And one of the things is like if you see somebody that you find attractive, you're automatically going to think about what you look like. Like, oh man, that person over there is like so attractive. Like, oh, I hope my hair looks good and like I don't have anything stuck in my teeth, and like because you're like, hello, they're an attractive person. I am also an attractive person that you may like to come over and talk to. And then if you're talking about Insta-Love, my next video is on tropes, and one of them is that. And I have a good example, but like the fact that like you see someone and like you don't even need to know them to be like, wow, they're really cute, and then be like keep like kind of like glancing over to be like, wow, do they also think I'm cute? Are they looking at me? I'm gonna walk very like put my shoulders back, walk very straight by them, and just give them like a casual glance and like whatever. Like it's not just like going up to somebody being like, I love you, which is what like the Insta-Love is based on.
Yeah, if you're going to have an instant attraction, you have to look at kind of the stakes and what your character is willing to put on the line for their attraction right from the beginning. Because if it's like, I think you're really cute and I will die for you, then it's like, no, that's Insta-Love. But if it's just like, I think you're really cute, maybe I would do something a little risky if it meant I got to keep hanging out with you. That is much more realistic.
And I try to remember like the difference between writing YA and adult, and like how intensely I felt things when I was like YA age, of like there were no like low-key crushes in my life, and then like moving into writing like adult romance and trying to balance the like, okay, but I had other things going on, and I knew better to like play it cool.
Or you could even have a
I don't
character
know if I
like
knew
trying
better
to
to
play it cool.
Yeah, I knew that I should be playing it cool.
You should at least pretend to play it cool.
And that is how I found out I am terrible at acting.
Yep. We had Lizzie Summers mentioned book blurbs can hint at stuff like telling a reader what trope is part of the plot, at least the ones I read, and mostly that's new adult and adult. So yeah, definitely how you market your book makes a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. Which is like a whole topic. Marketing your book correctly.
Well, we haven't done that in a long time. We should do
Yeah,
that.
maybe we should do something on that. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right, tuck that in the back pocket.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
I feel like we know a lot more about marketing books than we did last time we talked about it. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think like there are important ways to avoid Insta-Love, because like I definitely have encountered it in books where, yeah, it's like we just met and I'm willing to like put my life on the line and die for you. And it's like, and like also I think a big part of it is that like, should your character at this point in the book be willing to give up the other things they want? Like not even just like sacrificing their life, but like if they have some major goal, like is it too early for them to be like, I'd give up that whole goal that I've been fighting for this person? I think that's when it can get really frustrating.
And like
For
I
sure.
do love a good slow burn for a romance. It's not always feasible if it's like a standalone or whatever. But we were talking about like fake dating and distraction, making out and stuff. I was thinking about like Jake and Amy in Brooklyn Nine-Nine and how well that worked because it had time to breathe. But obviously you can't do that in every story because sometimes you only have a limited.
Yeah, I do love slow burns when there's room for them.
And when everyone knows right from the get-go, but it's like seeing those little moments, it's so nice. They give me all the warm fuzzies.
Definitely. One of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about this, a lot of the stuff that we've referenced has been like enemies or rivals to lovers, where you're kind of like fighting at first. But one of the things that I've noticed that I've done in my own writing before and also like bothers me when I encounter it in books is when two people who are going to be love interests meet and have the exact same level of wittiness. Like it's almost like you could switch their names out in the banter and you wouldn't know who was saying which thing. And it gets played off as like, oh, they're so perfect for each other that their banter is exactly the same. But for me, that is always a pretty big red flag. That you have done something wrong because no one's exactly the same.
Yeah. Or a lot of the time the banter or like the wittiness is kind of rude. And I'm like, I don't get why you like that. Like,
I would not keep hanging out with someone who was rude to me.
Yeah, right? Like I don't get all these love interests that are rude or mean, and I'm like and they're like, oh, it's an enemies to lovers. I'm like, no, I don't know. Like,
I think if they're rude or mean, you have to have a really good reason why they're going to keep being together long enough for them to get past the rudeness.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of anything that like does that really well, and I can't really think of it at the moment.
I know, I did not. I should have like looked up more books before we started this.
Actually, what are books?
I'm looking at my shelf. Gideon the Ninth did that pretty well, actually. Yeah.
That's on my TBR, probably next.
Oh, you're gonna love it.
You are. All the goth romances. 2K20.
Space Gaze.
It's been on my shelf for forever, and I have not read it yet. Yeah, and I also think you have to be careful, especially with like a rivals or enemies to lovers kind of situation, that like the love interest in particular like needs to be a real character, like not just someone for the main character to banter with. Like it's just kind of like, ooh, here's this person that snarks back with them. Isn't snark fun? And like it is fun, but like who is this person, and like do they exist for other than just to like be fun snark leading into kissing with the main character, you know? Because like that's fun to write, but
like what else are they doing?
Full like just romance novels where when that's the entire plot, there's so much effort given to fleshing out the love interest, because you can't just have them be a banter machine. It would be a very boring book. There has to be something that's keeping them apart, or something they're working towards together, or something that has them continuing to interact. Like, it really can't just be love interest scenes, because that's literally the whole book.
Yeah. I would definitely highly recommend, if you are wanting to include romance, if you're in your novels, definitely reading some books that are just romance. If you have never done that before, it can be really, really valuable and will really help with making your romance seem more fleshed out.
And it can really help you understand like the arc that a romance needs to take, because like that is the main arc of the plot. So seeing kind of the shape of that and the ups and downs can be really helpful.
For sure.
So kind of branching off of like avoiding things like Insta-Love or like relationships that aren't developed well, what are like small things that you think can help like develop a relationship throughout the book to show that like, oh, these people are starting to like each other more and more?
I mean, besides having the love interest like swoop in and save them from something, I think the small acts of service, because that's kind of what I think about when like I'm in a relationship, or if I see it happening, I'm like, oh, okay, like that person obviously likes that other person because they're offering to buy them a coffee, or they're, you know, giving them their scarf, or they're like sitting really close to them, or like offering to do something or get something for somebody. And like that, I'm like, oh, okay, so there's some kind of like care or connection there. So
Yeah,
I'd say, yeah.
I think like the small things that show that they're like paying attention to the other person can be really big. Because like anybody who cares about the character could like do something for them, but like noticing that, yeah, they look like really stressed and tired, and getting them a coffee, or like making sure they get a nap or something. Like,
or even just being like, oh, are you okay?
Kind of thing. I think that's a big thing, is like if no one else is noticing something, but like this one character does like notice that they're struggling, that can always be great.
Yeah. Or even wanting to notice. There's a scene in Cryer's War where Cryer she's at like this party or something, and she's hearing some music, and she just wonders, like, I wonder if Ayla would like this music. And like, she wasn't there or anything, but just the fact that she wasn't there, and Cryer was kind of wondering what she would or how she would react if she was there, was a very like, oh, she's definitely interested.
Yeah, like keeping them in the back of your mind.
And just that heightened awareness of when they are with you, like, where are they in the room? Like, should I shift so that they can see me better?
Yeah, I think that's like a great thing you can incorporate. All of this really are things you can incorporate when there are like other bigger, more important things going on. Like, you know, like, yes, there may be something really like big going on and dangerous things going on, but that doesn't stop the fact that like your main character is going to like notice if the other person's in danger, or like they're going to notice if they're like really struggling or having a hard time or whatever. Like, they're going to be more attuned to like the person's like emotional state.
For sure. I'm also a big fan of having other people around your character who care about them, just being like, hey, what's going on? Because I can't think of anyone I've ever dated where I didn't have a friend or family member be like, so you're being real weird around them. What's the deal?
Yes. Yeah, I'm always a big fan of like a close friend who like notices, like, so how do you feel about this person?
Yeah. Like, hey, you know that person, we're getting real close to that party. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And that can always be like fun tension of like the character like kind of like denying it or backing off or whatever. So because like they're like unsure or whatever. So
and showing kind of how the person's comfort level with that person changes. If they aren't friends beforehand, or like they aren't really close friends, like it's not a very close friends to lovers relationship. If it is like we met recently and we like each other, showing how the way they like physically interact with each other changes, because, you know, you aren't going to be touching the arm of someone you don't know necessarily, and kind of shifting from those different levels of physical affection. Or how it changes if you are really close friends who normally like slap each other's shoulders. I don't know, what do friends do when they like each other? Slap each other's shoulders. Going from friend slaps to I like you slaps. great at romance, guys. That's why I write so much of it in my books.
I do like seeing like how the way a character like behaves around another character changes as they like become more aware of their feelings. You know, like things that, yeah, maybe at the beginning they would have been totally comfortable with. Now they're like, oh, wait, is this too much? Am I coming on too strong or whatever? You know, where before it just wouldn't have mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, even if a character isn't outright like, because sometimes like characters don't recognize what they're feeling or they aren't willing to admit it yet. But like just through like the things they do or the things they don't do can show a lot compared to like how they behave around other people.
Or how they feel about that, the upper, wow, words. How they feel about the love interest doing something maybe normal or abnormal. Like, oh, they're over there talking to that girl like a lot. Like, I don't know if I like that. Or like, oh, they've never been weird about it, about this one thing before, and suddenly they're acting strange. Like, what's going on? Like noticing of the differences.
I'm a big fan of characters who are like, what is this thing I'm feeling? I don't like this. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it and deny it. It's always fun. It's always a fun part of like a slow burn as a character that just like refuses to admit.
And it plays in well with a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi where you typically have much higher stakes. Or not higher, I guess. It's just different stakes. Which
more life-threatening stakes.
More life-threatening stakes, yeah.
I'm thinking right now of Six of Crows with Kaz and Inej, because I just saw this I was reading something and this came up, and how because Kaz is very reserved and like does not show his feelings, especially his romantic feelings towards Inej, that at one point, I think, she asks him, like, what do you want, Kaz? And his internal monologue is like, I just want you, and I just want you to, like, think good of me, and I just, like, want to be with you. But but he, like, of course doesn't say that, and he says, like, oh, I want to be the most powerful man in the city, or I want, this mission to go well, and, like, kind of leaves. And so you can show a character, like, thinking something or being like, hey, don't say that out loud, and then, like, say something completely different.
Yeah, like Kaz is a really good example of like showing like the small ways that someone like has feelings for another character, because it takes him a long time to really admit anything. But you can like tell that he cares about Inej like in a different way than the way he cares about his other friends from very early on.
For sure. That was making me think about how I've read a lot of books where the main character is kind of oblivious or not admitting feelings while they're being pursued by someone who's very emotionally open. And I would love to see that switched where like the POV character is the one who's being like, no, but I really, really like you and would really like to date. And the other person is just like, we're saving the world. We're pals.
From Peter's point of view.
Oh, God. Exactly. So if anyone has any recs for books where that happens, definitely drop them in the discussion section or the comments if you're watching this after the fact.
It's like, I would love in. That.
Yeah. Yes, just like, I am very in. And they're like, you mean in on the mission? And they're like, no, I want to kiss you right now. I would love that so much.
And also, because we've like mentioned a couple of times how like sometimes it can be easy to let a romantic plot kind of fall by the wayside because there's more important things happening. But I'm a big fan in general, like in books where there's like really high stakes and a lot of action, like allowing there to be quiet moments in your book as well. Because I think it can be really exhausting for readers if it's like action, 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 danger, 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 like constantly. And so like, even if it's not romantic stuff, I think it's like good to have moments where your like characters get a chance to breathe and like interact with each other so that your readers can have a chance to breathe. And so you can develop those characters and they're like develop plot along the way too. Like action and danger scenes are not the only way to advance your plot, even if you're writing an action story. And so that can be a really good way to kind of slip in those like emotional moments and some of the romantic development.
Also thinking for like the development of the romance, if you're having a big action adventure plot line and the two characters are falling in love, wow, all this is happening. You can show how they care about that person by being like, at the very beginning, I don't care, it's just me, am I surviving okay? And then once there's like a big battle sequence, it could be like, where's that other person? Are they doing okay? Let's fight back to back, and kind of have that attachment, or like, oh no, they've been hurt, they've been slain, and have that emotion too, so you can like feel that
in the middle of a battle, or getting married in the Pirates of the Caribbean example.
I was just thinking
yeah. But it can be them like paying attention to each other and like helping each other.
Yeah. Barbosa, marry us. I don't think now's the best time.
Classic.
I love that movie so much. It's so bad. It's so good.
Someone was tweeting about Pirates of the Caribbean earlier today, so it's been on my mind.
As it should be.
always be on your mind.
Yes.
So I was wondering if, because it sounded like some of us have had trouble in the past with like making sure romance gets developed throughout the book. Is that something you go back and like track in revisions? Like when you're like looking at the arc of your plot, do you also kind of like plot out the romance and look at it? Like how do you fix that when you realize you haven't developed it enough?
I definitely do most of my revisions build up in, or most of my romance build up in revisions. And yeah, usually it's kind of looking at, well, do I need to add scenes to make this happen? Or are there places that I can fit it in? And so then I look at the plot that I have and figure out, well, where do the beats of the relationship need to be for them to make sense with where I have them ending up in this book? And yeah, usually I go in pretty heavily in revisions and do that.
I always find myself in revisions looking at like how much my main character is interacting with the love interest versus all the other characters, because sometimes finding that balance can be difficult. Like I either have them like never interacting with the love interest, or like they only interact with the love interest, and it's like what happened to all their friends and everybody else. And so like I'm always like looking at that particularly, like how much are they interacting with different people, because it can't just be the person they're falling in love with, because that's not healthy.
I look a lot. I do a lot of pre-planning when it comes to romance. So I'll like write out each of my scenes, just like a brief, like, okay, they're meeting with the other character scene, they're going to the museum scene, and then they're gonna from there go back to their house, and I'll kind of like just look at all the scenes and be like, all right, I need to like, okay, I know that I want them to have this big moment here, so that means that from the time they meet over here, I'm going to need to put in a certain amount of moments that they meet or what have you, and then as I'm writing kind of go and be like, would it be appropriate to have them have another conversation here? No, okay, we'll save that for the next scene, or yes, okay, we'll add in a small little throwaway line that will be added to in the next scene when they actually do meet each other. So like I'll plan it out a little bit more.
Yeah, since I'm such a like big picture plotter, I don't necessarily like plot scene by scene from the beginning. I tend to have like more big picture ideas of like what's going to happen in the romance. So I'm like, oh, like halfway through the book, like the character's slowly going to start to feel this way, and by the end, like this thing is going to happen that's either going to like make or break the romance. Like so I'll have like some ideas of those big items, but I do really struggle with everything in between. So like one big issue I have in my first drafts with romance is just that like the development of the relationship and like their feelings are like all over the place in like a way that would not be fun to read, where it's like, I like this person, I hate this person, I like this person, I hate this person. And so like evening that out and making sure like that the characters aren't just like going back and forth constantly and like how they feel and how much they're willing to admit is something that I really have to like iron out in revisions every time.
Yeah. When I'm doing a romance, usually I just know, okay, these two people are going to like each other. And because I am a pretty bare bones plotter right now, I'll know what it is or why it is that my two characters like each other. And usually it boils down to like, I write a lot of morally gray POV characters. And so it's usually, well, this love interest challenges their ideologies without judging them for where they came from and what made them this way. And so knowing that really helps with the development of both of the characters anytime that they are together. And most of the big moments get ironed out later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something I struggle a lot with in romance is making sure there's like enough tension with the romance too, because like I always like default with the romance. I just like want things to be good. I'm like, oh, I just want them to be happy. So even if everything else is a mess, I just want them to be happy together. But making sure there's like enough tension between the two characters can be a really big part of having like a satisfying romantic arc, and kind of having that like, are they going to get together kind of feeling. I mean, of course, like books where they get together earlier in the book are valid too, but especially if you're going to be doing something a little bit more drawn out, building up that tension of like, is this going to happen? As a reader, I think it's going to happen because you're giving me all the clues, but like, will it? Because like there's things coming between them, and finding that sort of stuff that kind of like keeps the characters from maybe like having a fully happy ending or whatever their ending is something that I find pretty difficult. I don't know if anyone else does.
Yeah, for sure. Finding the balance of, well, why aren't they together right now? Versus conversely, having them do something unforgivable, that why would they be together after all of that?
Yeah,
is
like
definitely difficult.
I've definitely read some books where it like drives you crazy because like one character just like keeps going back on things so often, you know, like they're like, oh yeah, I kind of want to be with you. And then like something happens and they like pull back, and they do it so many times. I've seen it happen a lot in like TV shows where there's like a romantic plot where like they almost get together and then one character does something to like stop them from getting together.
Where if they just had a conversation, maybe they could work it out.
It happened so much in the show Lucifer, it drove me crazy. Yeah, I would feel like they would be getting like so close, and then like he would do some Lucifer thing again, and then like he would learn from his mistake and be like, oh, I shouldn't like be like this, and then like 10 episodes later he'd do it again right when they were getting close to getting together. And so I think it gets to a point where like as a writer it seems like you're trying too hard to keep characters from getting together, and it like doesn't feel, the barriers don't feel authentic anymore. So I think you need to be like conscious of like when your slow burn is over, basically, you know, and like either something different has to happen or they need to get together kind of thing. And I think knowing that it's okay if characters get together before the end of the book or before the end of the series, like I think for a long time a lot of us were like conditioned to think that like, oh, if you have a romance in like a genre book,
kiss at the end.
Yeah, you have to wait until the end of the series. A lot of TV shows used to be like that. Like you have to get to the end of the TV series before these characters will get together. Stargate.
Oh man.
Like in the case of, you know, when trilogies were like the only thing that was getting published, it was always that you get together in the first book, then you have relationship problems in the second book, and then you all work it out and save the world in the third book. And it was just because like people didn't know what to do. Basically, and you like don't know what to do in the second book. So like, well, they're together, so like the end, like what do you do? And then you're like, well, I don't have to do anything anymore. I don't have anything else for them to do, so they can't be happy. So love triangle. And you're like, no man, that's
like,
no.
as if characters can't like have a plot and development while also being in a happy relationship.
Yeah, right. Like
even just exploring some of the ways relationships can also be interesting or a struggle, or like it doesn't always have to be a perfectly happy relationship. Like it's got to end up there, but there's so much you can do within a relationship.
They can like admit they like each other and like have some sort of relationship without things being perfect yet or ever perfect.
Yeah. Well, it's not like, I mean, I'm not married, but like two of you are, and so like when you get married, it's not like everything just ends and then like that's it, the end. Like
my story is over.
Yeah, you still have a relationship.
That's
like,
it.
Nothing interesting. I'm relegated to a background character in someone else's story now.
Exactly. I'm like, no, man. Like you're still gonna change. You're still gonna learn
it's part of the vow ceremony.
Wow, tell me these secrets of marriage.
Well, and I think it adds a different level of tension to your stories too, in a way that I am definitely a big fan of, and I don't feel like we get to see it enough in genre fiction. But this idea of, well, now you're in a relationship with this person. What does this mean for the positions you're in politically? What does it mean for your friendships? Like, are they all on board with this, or are you like shirking some responsibilities now? I think in every story it can bring up really interesting tensions that don't get to be explored as much with the slow burn.
And then you get like the fun, like now the villain is like threatening the love interest because like they're now the character's weakness, you know? So like there's some really interesting things you can do if you allow your characters to get together before the last book in the series, which is also valid. But I think
it's all great.
Yeah, I think just knowing that, like, if you're writing a romance into your book, it doesn't have to be a certain way just because that's like what you've read in other books.
For sure.
Because I know for a long time I felt like a romance in the book had to be a certain like arc, I guess.
Yeah. I want to say like almost all the most exciting things about my last relationship happened after we got together. Like after we were like, yes, we like each other. Yes, we've like gone out, a couple times. Yes, okay, I want to be your partner. We're in a relationship. Like that's when all the fun stuff happened. So like that's all the interesting stuff. That's when all the growth happened. That's when all the like the fun, I don't know, exploratory dates happen. Like that's like when when you can put a lot of stuff into your book and it doesn't have to just be like, I'm pining after you and like never saying anything for 3 books and then we kiss and then the end. Like
yeah. And seeing your character not feeling like they have to be on their best behavior. Because I think leading up to a relationship, you are pretty much trying to be like, look at me, I am saving the world. I can do all the things. And at least in real life, you usually don't see the less savory parts of a personality until you are more comfortable with them. So yeah.
We have a couple of good questions. Headphone Books said, I'm writing a romance in my story, but I feel the characters are almost always together and I'm trying to create some space between them so they miss each other more. Any advice on how to do that? Definitely kind of going back to what I said earlier, like, are there other people in your character's life that they should be spending time with, but maybe you're having them neglect because you're having them be with the love interest so much. So maybe like, there's some other important relationships in their life that you could be developing sometimes too.
Yeah. Do they have jobs?
Mm-hmm.
Does one of them suddenly have to travel? Do they have family somewhere else? Do they have family? I don't know.
What is the plot that's going on? That
Is there a hobby somewhere?
It does depend on what the plot is.
And if there isn't a reason for them to be out of the same room, could you find a way to put them on opposite sides of the room? So like even if they are still together, they aren't actually interacting with each other, and you're kind of getting the opportunity to see like, oh, well, how do they interact with this person in the room as opposed to me?
And if it's like a fantasy or a sci-fi or something, like you can always give one of them like a task they have to go do. So like they're sent off on a mission to go do something. And that will definitely separate them for a little while and creates that like tension where maybe like one of them starts to realize like, yeah, like I'm really worried about this person because they're gone. Maybe that means something.
Yeah, for sure.
And in Griswold said, can you discuss the elements you think make for a good love triangle?
I saw someone tweeting about this the other day, talking about how there aren't enough love triangles where you genuinely can't tell who the better pick is. Because in most love triangles, you can tell. Like there's no stakes because you know who the author's favorite is, so you know who they're going to go with. So it's like you, the author, are feeling conflicted about who the character should choose. That's always a good sign.
Yeah, I've read a couple books where I like was conflicted, where I was like, I like things about all these people.
We usually get like the, traditional hetero relationships. You get the girl, and then you get the one golden boy who usually has light hair and is like the favorite, like can do everything, get straight A's. Richard Campbell Gansey the third, and then you get the bad boy who has dark hair and he's a wild card, but she's never felt so excited around him, and it's just like, oh my god, y'all, like
trilogy.
I definitely think being like aware of the tropes of a love triangle can like help a lot in making one that's good, because there's definitely some things that have become tropes.
Yes.
And
Also,
I think
please,
a good one.
Yeah, please read the book called The Love Triangle. It's so funny, by Cale Dietrich. It's
I think it's the love interest, right?
Sorry, love interest.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. It's literally a book about a secret society that creates love interests for people, and then the main character
to be like spies or something.
Yeah, like a spy love interest, and they do all the tropes, and it's so funny. So if you want to,
and isn't it like these people are both sent out, and he like falls in love with one of the other spies or something?
Yes. Oh
Yeah,
yes, it's
so-
May. I forgot.
Yes,
so like
highly recommend.
he's sent, the
Yeah.
main character is sent to be a love interest to this one person, and then the company is like, there needs to be another love interest, so this other love interest is sent, and he's like a bad boy type love interest, and the girl has to choose one of them. It's very, very funny.
And I think even in like a more traditional love triangle, like I know they get a lot of hate, but I think they can be valuable. A lot of the really good ones that were coming out in the early 2000s were like, a lot of times they were reflecting, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, like reflecting the main character's development as a whole. So that's why a lot of times you'd get like the good neighbor boy and like the bad boy who like challenges her to think about things. Which obviously doing too much of that became a trope, but just thinking about maybe if your character is struggling with like two sides of their personality or two parts of their world and reconciling those things, a lot of times I think that can make a really interesting love triangle because it's reflecting like an inner struggle that the character is having with like figuring out their worldview and themselves, and it's reflected in these people that they are attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
Like Gale and Peeta in the Hunger Games, this idea of like, does Katniss want to be fighting forever, or does she want to like settle down at some point? And both of those are really valid and important things. And so like having to see her inner turmoil about which part of herself she wants in that regard, reflected in that romance. I love a good love triangle though.
Me too.
And I love the spins on them that are coming out now. Now that people aren't quite, not that they ever went away, but there were so many for so long that I think a lot of people really backed off on them for a while.
And I think they definitely, it got to a point where there were so many that it felt like they had to be there. And so you would get ones where, because I think it can be okay if like you as a reader kind of know who the character is going to choose because you know which part of themselves they're going to choose, kind of thing. You can kind of see where the story's going. But when it got to a point where you're like, but why do they even, like, they shouldn't like both of these people equally. Like, obviously one of these people is better than the other is when it really became an issue, I think. So I think both characters, even if the reader can tell who they're going to choose, both characters need to be equally appealing, at least. Like, you need to understand why. Like, if I'm like, why is this main character struggling? Like, obviously one of these people is a much better choice than the other, then that's an issue. So.
For sure. Like 17-year-old Megan knew there was no universe where Bella was going to pick anyone but Edward. But 17-year-old Megan was still like, okay, but Jacob.
Yeah. And I was still stressed and there was still so much tension. Actually, even though I knew who she was going to choose, there was still enough tension that it kept me like engaged.
One of the best things I liked about the Shatter Me series, well, it's not one of my favorites, but one of the things that I think Tara Mafi did so well is that love triangle, because and spoilers for something that's been out for like 8 years, that at the beginning of the book, when she first is introduced to
Warner and
Adam, thank you. I'm like, the boy that I don't like. When she's first introduced to Adam, you know, oh man, first person that she's ever seen, and wow, can miraculously survive her death powers. And is also super attractive, coincidentally. And then when you first meet him, she obviously falls in love with him because he's attractive and can
and the first person to ever be nice to her.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, well, obviously you're gonna fall in love with that person, like whether regardless as if like you want to, like you kind of can't help but like feel an attachment to that person. But then as the series goes on and she starts realizing that like, I want to fight and I want to be a part of the rebellion, and you know, I'm maybe not a good person. And that's when her relationship with Warner starts to adapt and develop. And then she finds out more about him. And then she ends up choosing like the villain because that's how she's developed. And so it's like, yeah, that does make sense that, I mean, I'm not with the very first guy that I ever dated, like, because people grow and people change and like you find out more stuff. So I find that that's like a good love triangle. But that's also what can be not done very well in the trilogies when you have the characters get together in the first book and then the second book there's like relationship tension, and it's all because some new person came in and love triangle, and I'm like, if you were super happy in your relationship, why are you suddenly looking at this person? I don't know. So like that's kind of the like, are they happy, or is this just like an easy way to create tension? Because I can find plenty of people attractive and not decide to go and like want to have sex with them while I'm with my partner that I've decided to be monogamous with, right? You know, it's a whole thing.
I think it can be really tricky to write a series like the Shatter Me series where the character gets together with someone early in the series, but they end up with someone else later on. Because of like reader expectations, it can be really hard to do that because like once two characters have gotten together in a series, you kind of just like expect that that's who the end game person is. And like, so I've read series like Shatter Me that do it really well. And I've read series that don't do it well, where it just like gets annoying or you get frustrated because you're like, I invested into this romantic interest and now they're like,
it's funny because like you see it so rarely in books, but it's so standard in TV.
And it's so like
you're
realistic
pretty
to real life.
sure that they're eventually going to break up with someone, and then they'll find someone new in season 3, and you'll just continue on that way. It's more interesting for television to keep kind of exploring that a little bit. But in books, it's all like, oh no, we're in this forever now.
Yeah. I think it can definitely be really interesting and really realistic when it's done well, but it has to be done well. I think you have to give clues from early on that maybe this person isn't the in-game person for your character.
Definitely, yeah. If you don't give any clues whatsoever, then that is when you will kind of go back on the reader expectations or like the deal you've kind of made with readers that I won't throw anything at you with nothing to back it up.
You might even at the very beginning be able to bring in those other relationships like friends and family to be like, hey, are you sure you want to be with this guy? Or like, oh yeah, it's like, I mean, yeah, good for you, but like, I don't know, I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm not feeling the vibe between you two or something. And they can be like, what? No, that's ridiculous. And then maybe later be like, oh, hey, my friend was right. Or
or for the character just be like, oh, I'm just dating and meeting people. And like, I know not everyone's going to be fine. I was just thinking that it's interesting that like Harry Potter is one of the few series I can think of where like he just dated people and it wasn't I never thought he was going to end up with Cho. Like, it was just kind of, but he was super into her for a while and he just moved on with his life and it was nice.
Yeah, it was like the series didn't convince you to like invest in their relationship or anything. You're just kind of like, oh, he likes this girl and he's going to kiss her and go on a couple dates, you know? And I think that like emotional investment is like what you have to be careful of as a writer is like maybe, I mean, you can't stop people from like liking a character or getting invested. Like you'll always have somebody who's disappointed because they're like, oh, I liked the original love interest better. I know there's been TV shows where I've like liked one of the earlier people they were with better than the later people or whatever.
Like Gilmore Girls. And
I was about to say Gilmore Girls is a great example.
There's always a debate of like everyone had different favorites and stuff. You just don't see that with books. Of like, for some people, every one of Rory's boyfriends, they're like, oh, this is like Lorelai. Everyone knew who she was going to end up with.
Yeah. And everything's valid except for Dean. He's the worst.
I don't like any of them that much.
I know. I was never 100% invested in any of them, but I really didn't like Dean.
Oh, yeah. Dean was by far the worst. I didn't like who Rory was with any of them. I was like, you get worse.
I think that Rory was the problem.
Oh no.
So speaking of like shipping things and reader expectations, have you ever shipped something that like wasn't actually the canon in-game ship?
I was trying to think of that earlier of like, I know there's been stories where I've picked the wrong love triangle love interest, but I can't think of it. Like,
I remember Emma texted me after the Air Furious, the Kira Cass one. It was called the Air, right?
I think so.
Oh yeah.
She didn't get with your choice.
And you know what? It's wiped from my mind. I don't remember who she gets together with. I don't remember any of the characters. So who knows?
You were so mad when you texted me. You were like, I am feeling personally attacked.
Yeah, I wiped. You're dead to me. Your book is dead to me. It's like, I don't remember.
Oh man.
Because like I feel like especially like when love triangles were really big, like I was pretty good at like knowing who the person was going to be. Because like, you know, there would always be like readers who were like mad because they're like, I thought it was going to be Gail. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Obviously it was going to be Peeta.
Yeah.
But
I'm like
I'm
looking
trying
at
to
my
think if
shelf
there
now,
were
like
any wrong.
It's hard to remember of like that era of love triangles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
All did
I
together in the end.
Oh, I did not. Well, she doesn't 100% to get together with anybody, but I wasn't happy about Delirium. I liked the
I was
second guy.
no.
How-
Yeah, I liked
Bad.
the second guy better than the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julian.
Mhm.
He was.
I
I
really
loved
liked
him. He was
Julian.
great.
Yeah. Where I felt like whatever the other guy's name was, like he's so forgettable because he was just like very like he was like bland YA love interest. All I remember is his hair looked like autumn leaves, and so I just pictured autumn leaves. Like his head was just leaves. Because that was she described it that way every single time. It was like 12 times in one book. His hair looks like autumn leaves. And I was like, so you're telling me that he's a tree?
Exactly.
I am attracted to a tree.
Honestly, a mood though.
Yeah. And I
I
didn't finish the Matched trilogy, but I remember like
no,
skimming through the
bad.
last couple books to see what happened and being kind of like disappointed. Like I was kind of like,
Yeah, because I really liked the Hometown Boy by the end of that trilogy.
yeah.
Like I really, really thought that she was gonna maybe like he was so much obviously better.
Mhm. It
have
feels
a
like
lot
one
of
of those like examples where like she needed to pick the other guy because she was picking like rebellion and change, but like he wasn't the better love interest. He wasn't the better person. Also, in Griswold, I'm sorry I called people who shipped Gale and Katniss idiots.
We will print Emma's retraction letter.
I will issue a non-apology.
I just remembered somebody that I didn't like that I picked the wrong side love triangle for. From Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. She ends up Alina ends up with Mal at the end of the
He was
trilogy.
just
And
boring.
I was so mad. He's so boring and doesn't support her and is like awful. I don't like him at all. I know a lot of people are very like anti-Darkling and like, yeah, he abused her a bit, like it was a thing. I'm still not like sorry.
Yeah. I have like complex feelings about it. Because once again, I get what she was like trying to do. That like, yeah, like sometimes like the dark bad boy Darkling character is not a good love interest. Like she definitely shouldn't have like ended up with him, kind of thing. But like, so like the normal guy was like the good guy for her to be with. But like, yeah, Mal was boring.
Yeah, he was boring and rude, and yet like didn't support her. Was like constantly trying to hold her back. Like I went on a whole like offline rant. One of my friends, I was like, I'm so mad because yeah, I get it because like, oh, the Darkling is like the dark side, and even if you are becoming morally gray, you should still choose the light. And Mal is the childhood best friend, and blah blah blah. And like the epilogue made me cry, but like I don't like him at all. It was awful. It's like
It's
no.
so disappointing to me because I read the spoilers because I wanted to know, but I hadn't read it yet, but I wanted to know before I like invested. And I was really excited about that because that happens pretty rarely. So
And it's like, and I love a good like good neighborhood boy. Like I love PETA, but like
we love a good boy. Who doesn't?
I just thought Mal was boring.
I was trying to look back over like a list of past book clubs. Let's check our website because I tried to search it on YouTube, and because we put the name of what our book club is going to be and all of the videos for that week, searching for book clubs is bringing up every video we've ever made.
Oh yeah,
there should be a section on our website.
Yeah, I
that's
haven't
just
got
book
the website.
clubs.
I just thought of it now.
Oh, okay.
Also, Missy Kate said, I feel I specialize in getting opposing characters together in fan fiction that don't belong in canon and making it believable is a challenge. That is like fan fiction writers are so talented.
Yes.
Like, things I like don't even really ship. If it's a good fanfic, I'll be like, yeah, I see it. This is great.
Yeah, I'm never very good at being like, it's not canon, but I like these people. I'm never like that. But then when I see someone else having written a story, I'm like, yeah, that would be great. Why didn't they write that? Like, so.
Yeah, definitely fan fiction, I feel like, was how a lot of us cut our teeth on just testing out the different kinds of romance that you could put into a fantasy world. Because, I mean, the characters were all already there to figure things out, play with.
We've read so many books. Holy crap, we've been around for a long time. I was trying to think of Throne of Glass because I remember that one being like a...
And
like I never finished the series and I knew it got even more complicated than where it was at the beginning.
when I said
series, if you want to know something, let me know.
When I said some books don't do a good job of having the character change love interests, that might have been what I was talking about.
Actually, yeah, like when that first started, oh man, So I like OG Selena and Dorian shipper. I love them so much. Cal was like fun for a little while, but I'm like,
Selena
meh,
and
I
Cal
don't know.
shipper. But I would have been okay with Dorian. I
don't
would have been
remember.
okay with Dorian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then when like at the end of the first book when they were like, no, they're just gonna be friends, I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, maybe at the very end of the series, everyone they both love will be dead, and then they'll have to get together. And then when she starts, I mean that was what made me so angry about I think it's Air of Fire, where
Queen of Shadows. I hate Queen of Shadows so much.
well, because so in Air of Fire, we're introduced to Rowan, to the eventual love interest, and I love the fact that in that book they were just friends. Like he was the mentor, he was the general that was training her up again, and I was like, wow, this is so amazing. It's actually like a guy and a girl dynamic that they're
A
just
platonic
friends.
friendship.
Wow, this is so great, and like they trust
Literally,
each other and
the
everything.
rules, the world building rules. Faye can only have one life mate, and he's already had one.
Yeah, so I'm like, we're good. And then Queen of Shadows just shot that out of the air, and I was so mad.
No, I haven't thought about that book in like 5 years, and like my
I'm
heart
so
is racing
sorry.
again now.
I think that is
I
one
feel
of
like it was just it felt like a betrayal of my like reader expectations. That like, and I know lots of people love Rowan or whatever his name is, and we're like, oh my gosh, he's so hot. But like, it just felt like such a betrayal, like as a reader, of like what she'd been setting up beforehand.
Yeah, because like when they said, "Oh, Faye can only love once," he's already had his life.
And it was like, she's been dead for a long time. It's fine.
Yeah,
That was the explanation.
I thought that it was gonna be like he learns how to platonically love somebody again, or like feel affection for somebody. And I was like, well, that's really sweet, and like that's really nice. And then Selena's gonna go home to Kale or Dorian or whoever else that she decides. And then no, it was all a trick. And
it's all a trick.
It
had to be the hot Faye character.
I mean, yeah, like
of course.
If that's one of my options, I'm obviously gonna pick that one. But like, yeah, I was very
the hot,
mad.
emotionally unavailable Faye character.
Hell yeah.
Well, I think that kind of plays into Purple Ghost said something super relevant to that, so I'll read that first. Breaking your own worlding rules. Capital N needs capital H heavy, capital F foreshadowing. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But it also leads to one of my own personal things that like it can be done well, but a lot of times I see it used as a cop-out, which is you have them get with someone else and then the first love interest just becomes a total jerk. And you're like, oh, well, it's fine. They weren't a good person. So obviously you hate them now. Unless it's done really, really well and over time with a lot of capital H heavy, capital F foreshadowing that they could take that turn. If you
it's
don't
really
do
lazy.
That, it seems like really lazy writing.
Yeah. Like characters can fall out of love and realize that it's not a good relationship for them without the person being like emotionally abusive or whatever. Out of nowhere.
And they don't have to be like, I'm gonna go fight this new love interest or whatever, because why? I don't even know. I can't even come up with a reason.
Yeah, that was something that I know this is like sort of controversial because a lot of people hate Court of Thorns and Roses, but that was something that I did actually like because in the first book I was like, I think I'm supposed to like Tamlin. I don't really like him, but like I think I'm supposed to like him because the main character likes him. And then in the second book, when they introduced this whole thing with Rysand, I was like, oh,
my problem is I didn't like Rysand either, so
which I know it's like
thought he was also awful.
But like that idea of like, oh, this person like Tamlin wasn't really a good person the whole time, and you like kind of start realizing it a little bit later, and you're like, oh, okay, so like that sort of works.
We had a related question from N. Griswold. What's a good way to make it clear to readers that these two characters are not a thing and will never be a thing? I don't want readers expecting a romance that's not coming.
That can be really hard because especially if the characters are like a man and a woman, like people are or a girl and a boy.
Readers
like,
are
gonna be like, oh, but they're close and they like care about each other. There's gonna be romance, right? Like good old heteronormativity. So
even beyond that, of just like you cannot stop shipper brains. Like just looking at Harry Potter again and like all the couples that J.K. Rowling was like, I did not. Why do people like Draco? Like this is you can't stop people.
I do think you can do
Well,
your
I'm
part in setting up reader expectations. Like you can make it clear, like you can have characters like a lot of times like what I'll see is like someone will ask the main character like, oh, you and this person seem really close. Is there something there? And the character's like, no, like there really isn't. So like I think that is perfectly fine and acceptable. And like you've done your due diligence as a writer. Can't control beyond that what people are gonna think.
Yeah, I had in the book that I'm finishing up revisions on, I had two characters that I was kind of worried people would think, oh, well, they're best friends. They've been best friends forever. Obviously, they'll get together eventually. And so I ended up just putting, like, I think it was 2 paragraphs in 2 different spots in the book where the main character was thinking to himself, like, oh, well, a lot of people think we get along so well. We should be best friends, or we should be in a romantic relationship. But it's never been like that. She's like my sister. I think it was like, oh, it's like looking at my reflection or something. Like just something that's like, nope.
Yeah.
Something pretty overt.
I think it also can help like if one character is seeing the other character like in a happy relationship and they're just like genuinely happy for them. That's usually a really good signal to me. Like if there's like no like semblance of like jealousy or anything, that's usually a pretty good sign to me. Like, okay, these characters are like not going to be a thing.
Yeah, because in those love triangles, it always goes that way of like the childhood best friend is suddenly so jealous when new bad boy comes to town.
Well, and right now I'm re-listening to The Raven Boys on audiobook, which is just, it's been a whole mood this month. I'm so happy.
Yes.
But I'm thinking specifically of Noah and Blue, because Noah is the one, well, I mean, yeah, like, yeah, he's very platonic with her, but they do have these like long scenes where we have a love triangle, but Noah's not in it. And like the way that Noah is portrayed as just like a friend is like he pets Blue's hair a lot, which I think is really cute. She's like spiky hair and he like pets her hair and she's like, oh, so spiky. And then just like throws his arm around her and is like, yeah, I'll give you advice, it's cool. So like having that kind of like familial what's the word I'm looking for? Like infantilization is definitely not the right word for it, but like that familial brotherly kind of bond.
It's a very selfless
know.
kind of love. Like you're very much not expecting anything other than emotional support from it. And yeah, that could be its whole own chat, because I feel like platonic relationships are just as much, if not more important in fiction than romantic ones.
Well, like Noah and Blue, like they're just having fun. Like at one point at the book that I'm in Dream Thieves right now, and he like breaks her into Monmouth Manufacturing, and they're just like going around the apartment and like having fun and playing games. And there's no like, oh, Noah's looking at me right now. Like it's just like they're just like having fun and like jumping on the bed and then like reading books and
not
like,
having the self-consciousness.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I mean, there's always going to be someone who's like, oh, but shouldn't they be together? And you can just be like, no, they're best friends. They do what they want.
I feel like Raven Boys did that really well with Blue and Ronan as well. Of like, there was like this begrudging build up to friendship, but they never saw each other that way for like later obvious reasons. But like, and that's just not who Ronan is.
As a reader before Ronan's sexuality was confirmed, there was still never a moment where I was like, oh, well, maybe Ronan and Blue will get together. Like, never once crossed my mind.
Speaking of characters not necessarily having to be together, I wanted to like kind of, because it looks like we're getting kind of towards the end, talk about like whether a book like has to have a romance. Because I think for a long time that was like an assumption, was like, oh, a book won't get traditionally published if it doesn't have a romance, which I don't think was ever truly true. But a lot of people have assumed it. So I was wondering what people's thoughts were on like books that just don't have any romance in them.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, I think they become more common for sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna say a large part of it is because like love and attachment kind of happens to everybody. So it's not, even if your main character doesn't have a love interest in your story, the best friend will, or if it's a space adventure, one of the crew members is going to talk about his wife and daughter, or like that kind of thing. So I think a lot of people are like, well, if I don't have romance, then I can't have any romance attachment at all whatsoever, and it's just this one lonely person. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. And you can have strong friendships and not have like a romance attachment in your book as well.
Very YA specific for a long time, because like technically now we are the not just YA word nerds, but in YA it felt like for the longest time all the big titles were trying to be the next Hunger Games, the next Twilight, and to have that you had to have the romance. But only now that things have kind of calmed down, there's more of that flexibility for different kinds of stories. Whereas before, like other kinds of fantasy for adults and stuff, you had just an adventure, but in YA it was all like, and a romance.
I think that like for the longest time, and I still see this occasionally in reviews of books, like you'd see someone on like Goodreads or something being like, oh, obviously the author was just forced to put this romance in there by the publisher, which like I don't think any author was forced by the publisher to add a romance to their book. Like maybe beef it up. Like I've definitely heard authors be like, oh, like like my editor thought I should like strengthen the romantic plot line some. But I think that's definitely a fallacy, especially now that like, oh, the author was forced. That's why like the romance doesn't feel authentic, is because the author was forced to add it in. And so I think it kind of feeds into that assumption that you have to have it in your book.
That reminds me of, I was in Pitch Wars several years ago now, and I had a very, very light romance in my book. The idea was that like, oh, well, I'll lay the groundwork for it here, and then if I get a book 2, it would have the full-on romance. And one of my mentors was an editor and one was an agented writer, and they were both like, this is nice and I like the idea of this romance, but you either need to beef it up or cut it out. And we ultimately decided to just cut it out because the story didn't need a romance, and not every story needs a romance. It's nice to have sometimes, and when you know going in that there's gonna be some romance there, that can definitely be nice. But there's so much more to human relationships than just the romantic side of things, that a story absolutely doesn't need one to feel complete.
Yeah. Sometimes there's so many other things going on in your character's story that like they don't need it,
Yeah. So it's fine. Like if you're watching this and you're like, oh no, I don't have any, like that's totally fine. Books like that are getting published all the time, especially now. It's also a great time for romance that kind of subvert the expectations that we've gotten used to, one girl choosing between 2 boys, one the hometown hero, one the bad boy. Those are still great, but there's a lot more room for nuance even in the romances themselves.
So Penumbra Mine just had one really good question that I want to maybe like end on, unless we have any other questions after that. But they asked, what if one partner in the grand romance of the series dies? Can the survivor have a new relationship, or will the overlay of the lost love cause problems? And absolutely, they can have another relationship. The first thing that came to mind was Ray Carson's Girl of Fire and Thorns series. There's like this super cute first love in the first book, where like she like meets this guy and like they have this really sweet little relationship, and like he likes her a lot and everything, but he dies. But then like there's an even bigger and better romance in the like final book that like because of like everything she's experienced. And it's like a really good reflection of her character development too, of like the way she's grown and the way she's like come to like love herself better and stuff by the time she gets into that like final relationship, which she wouldn't have been ready for in the first one. So
for sure. I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you give your character time to grieve. If it's like, oh, the person I love died, but I met a cute guy at the funeral. No one's going to be happy with that. And giving the reader time, I think, too, to actually see the grief happening can be really helpful. I know we like to make fun of Twilight a lot, but Teen Megan was very shocked by the part in New Moon where they just have the months on each page, where it was just like, oh, nothing is happening because it's all grief. Like, to me, that was like, whoa, she's really mourning this.
It's one of the best
Or-
pieces of writing in like that whole book. It's really well done.
In the whole series.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah. Or like even if you had a new love interest introduced after your first love interest died, have that character grieve, but maybe like go into a new relationship like too fast or like with wrong intentions, and then that can lead to fallout or development or a big fight or a big like epiphany scene, whether to like keep going with that relationship or not. So that's so many options.
It's definitely like a romantic partner dying. Once again, just like two characters getting together, the romantic partner dying is also not the end of the character's story. So like they're still going to have growth and development. And so I think along with that, there's room for another relationship too. So Megan put the name of that series in there. So she just released like another book, I think, that's like a sequel to the original trilogy. So
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably about it. We've been going for a little over an hour now. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Anyone have anything final they want to say?
Yeah. Sorry if we missed your questions. Thank you for coming. We're really glad you were here.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
What you want to write when it comes to a romance, or don't write it at all.
Yeah.
Just make sure that it's well developed. I think that's basically like, just make sure it makes sense to your readers. All right, so we will see y'all next Sunday for whatever our chat will be. And we will also have videos up on Tuesday and Thursday this week like usual. And we'll let you know what that live chat topic is going to be in the description of those. So yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Bye.